What makes you think you're ready for machine learning and AI if you don't trust your data sources? Do you think there's an incentive to blow when you're in IT?
Do these people know what data science means in the real world?
It's not because we're smarter than you. It's just we know a lot more about what's not going to work, and we don't have to spend any time thinking about it.
Billions and billions were invested in the technology industry, and everything kind of collapsed afterward.
A lot of your managers, your executives, the people you work with, the stakeholders, they don't really understand what we do. There is a difference between being busy and being productive.
AI, all very good, very fun, but not perfect. Get feedback, build something.
So today I'm here with Emmanuel Maggiori. He's a published author. He's a CTO. He's a PhD, really successful guy. I stumbled across his book Silicon a while back. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed his insights. And in this day and age of people kind of riding the hype train and talking grand, it was really nice to find somebody who had real practical experience, was down to earth about it, and just the anti-hype and the anti kind of these tech billionaires and all these weird attitudes they have. It was really refreshing for me now that I'm in social media and I'm exposed to this stuff on a day-to-day basis to find somebody who is a little bit more down to earth. So Emmanuel and I were just decided to get together to have a conversation. He started a YouTube channel to go along with his books and his image and brand, and I want to help boost him. So one of the things we're going to do today is talk a lot about tech, but from a perspective of the early career, from the perspective of the beginner. So thank you, Emmanuel, for coming on and, fill in any of the gaps that I missed.
No, that's all good. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
I would just say, sometimes I say I'm a professional Karen. Yes, because it feels like someone told me maybe professional skeptic or, sounds a little bit better. But yeah. I've been doing that a lot, it's I feel like someone needs to tell that other side of the story. It's like, yeah, AI, all very good, very fun, but not perfect, right? There are things there are limitations that need to be acknowledged. In 2021, we had this epic unicorn boom, right? Where billions and billions, were invested in the technology industry, and then everything kind of collapsed afterward, right? A lot of people got fired. Twitter ended up running at 80%, like with 80% fewer people, right? And it's still running. So some people wondered, were they really working that hard? Lots of things have happened that are pretty crazy in the field, and unfortunately I always get this urge of kind of trying to dig a bit deeper into that and become a professional Karen that will be there complaining about all those things.
Yeah, and I think the proper term these days is shitification.
Right.
That's the term I'm hearing a lot. And I've experienced it. And it's it's just something maybe you feel the same way. Like when you have actual software development skills and you get good at the craft, you start to get really frustrated sometimes with the software you use on a day-to-day basis because there will be things that don't work correctly or questionable, design decisions. And you look at the software and you're like, this isn't even that hard to fix. Like, what are you guys doing? And then you see somebody like Elon Musk kind of, laying off 80% of his workforce. And I think X, the quality of X is degrading. I mean, there are always problems with bots and misinformation on X. And I think that's just getting worse with the changes that have been made. But the fact that he was able to do that does say that there is a difference between, being busy and being productive. And I know that's a topic that you've commented on before. And for beginners here, a lot of students that I work with, they kind of put employed IT professionals on this pedestal. And it's kind of a fine line for me to walk as an instructor and a tech professional that, hey, look, in IT, there's a normal curve of talent and capability just like there is in any field. And there are a lot of people who burrow into companies and are able to fake it pretty well, even though they're not super productive, they're not super useful. Do you think
this is easier to do in the tech industry?
I do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but I think it's because a lot of your managers, your executives, the people you work with, the stakeholders, they don't really understand what we do.
Yeah.
So if a non-technical project manager or a stakeholder comes to me and says, hey, I want to build this feature, how long does it take? I could tell them 2 months, 6 months, 12 months. They have no idea.
Yeah,
that allows a lot of bad actors.
I think that's one of the main reasons that people from the outside, they don't understand how technology works, right? So it's very easy to stretch it out, right? To say, and I've seen extreme examples of this. Like one of my friends, his company got a quote from a consulting company to build a feature for them or do something for them. And it was hundreds of thousands that they quoted for this. But my friend, he was like, I'm going to do it myself. And he did it in less than 2 weeks by himself. It was like this sort of data pipeline that you had to configure, right? So it wasn't too complicated. So the bloat factor was enormous.
Do you think there's an incentive to bloat when you're in IT? Because if you promise a feature, and this is my experience in my professional career, if I promise a feature next month and I go 2 weeks overdue, I get a ding, I get a bad mark, and that reflects poorly on me.
Yeah.
So it seems like the natural inclination is I'm going to think about how long I think it's going to take, and then I'm going to double it.
Yeah, or more. I think you've heard about Agile, obviously, and the Agile principles of software development. I'm quite sympathetic to those principles, and I apply them myself because with software, it's a bit hard to know how long something will take to develop, right? You can be surprised very often, and you may need to change things along the way as you encounter problems. Your client may realize that's not what I really wanted, and you have to course correct, right? So the idea of Agile is let's go one step at a time. Let's build a little thing and then we'll validate it with the client, with the user. And I think that's fantastic. And the problem is that managers didn't like this very much, right? So they created was a series of recipes to try to quantify this somehow, right? And one of them is Scrum. You have to kind of promise in the beginning. Yeah, you split it into small tasks, but you kind of still need to promise how long this is going to take, right? Or estimate in advance how long it's going to take. And I'm going to tell you, it's not a promise because you meet every day, right, in the morning. And if it's taking longer, it's flexible, you can adapt it. But in practice, that's not what happens, right? So in the beginning of the sprint, which is usually 2 weeks, you need to plan or kind of commit to doing something, right? And people stretch their tasks a lot because of this. And I've said in the past that it was kind of performance or productivity was sacrificed in the name of predictability, right? And there's a trade-off there. If you want to be predictable, you're going to make it longer. There's no other way, right? And I think that's a bit unfortunate because I don't know if a lot is gained by all those metrics. Does it really help to have this kind of predictability, or maybe a little bit to kind of know in a ballpark when you will be able to deliver something, but it comes at a cost. Yeah,
the only way you can accurately estimate something is if you've done it before. And some tasks fall into that bucket. Like if you're adding a new feature that's substantially similar to a feature you've added before, you can get really close to the mark. But if you're doing something new, like, I mean, if we're bringing AI into this, if somebody's like, hey, I want to embed AI into my product, how long is that going to take and what's it going to cost? It's like, well, chances are your team hasn't even ever done RAG or anything like that before. So they're going to have to go do research. They're going to have to figure this out. Then they're going to have to figure out how to edit your product. And there's
a lot of R&D to the point that you can't even know if it's going to work for you until you do it. You need to assess whether AI will predict what you want to predict, right? I've spoken to clients, people who thought we have this data and we want to predict the unpredictable, right? Like any reasonable human being would have realized this is actually not predictable. But anyway, we were told AI is fantastic, so we have a bunch of data and AI will do it for you. But in reality, you don't even know until you try, because AI needs to find patterns in the data, or talking about maybe old school machine learning. But you want to find patterns to see if that thing you're trying to predict is predictable. You don't know until you try. And I think a lot of people want to even skip that part. I think it can be a work package in itself. You say, okay, my job now is to understand if I can predict this, if I can do this job. They're not, we're just going to build the product to do it. And obviously, you're not going to know how long that's going to take. You can't even know if it's going to work. I think that's very common, with all this R&D stuff.
I was giving a talk a few years ago to a global shipping company. I mean, this is a brand everybody has heard of. And I'm in a room with some of their upper management, and I'm giving a talk on just data literacy. Just they're trying to get better at data. They're trying to better understand their data and stuff. And that's something companies have been working on for a long time. I mean, that was something early on, big data, machine learning, but you still have garbage in, garbage out. And at one point during this talk, I asked the room, I said, do you trust your data? and about half the room started laughing.
Okay, which means no.
Yeah, and I just kind of stand there quietly for a minute, and I'm just like, well, what makes you think you're ready for machine learning and AI if you don't trust your data sources? Like, how is that ever going to work? And they don't have a good answer, and this kind of breaks into like, fake problems and waste of money and waste of productivity. Like, there are so many companies that I experience in my consulting that they're aspirational. They want RAG, they want AI, they want machine learning, they want predictive stuff, but they haven't kept their data house in order, and it's just not possible for them to be successful.
Even worse sometimes, in the sense that they haven't even thought what they want AI for. I've seen this repeatedly. Companies, they put together a team of 60 people or 70 people. I've seen that repeatedly. I've seen teams of 12 people all the way to 70 to use or to even find what to do with AI. It's like, let's hire all these experts because we are, let's say, I don't know, a bank, and we'll definitely be able to do something with AI, or a telecommunications company. And we're going to opt, because AI is all the rage, right? So let's do something with it. And they have this hammer, and they're trying to find the nails. And in my experience, that doesn't work very well, because you have methodological bias. Right? It's like, the solution, the tool you want to use, which is not how you do engineering, right? It's the other way around. So I have a problem. Like, what is the solution to that problem? I've seen that a lot. I once, I was involved in this project where they hadn't even spoken with a potential client or a potential user. So this was an internal product within a company. And they hired, I think it was 70 people. And I asked them at one point, I was involved in the project, and I asked them, okay, but because it was very strange what they were doing, right? You saw even the actual UI being built. The group of designers, like UI designers, had developed a kind of a Figma, design of the UI, and then the front-end developers had actually built it. It was functional. And it was all to support data scientists across the organization. So it was AI related. It was kind of, the idea of this company was, let's build tools to help people work with AI across the organization. And then I had worked as a data scientist for years, and I look at this tool and it's like, why are we uploading Excel files in places we don't use Excel files as data scientists? Like, that's not really what we do. And it was like, maybe you need to walk me through who your user actually is, how they work. And they're like, oh, we've never spoken with them. I'm like, what do you mean? Yes, we're taking this fail fast approach.
Well, they're going to get the fail part, right?
I was like, fail for sure, because it's like, And the fail fast thing came from one of the managers of the team, like the upper managers. He was like, this is how we do it, like the popular approach now, the lean approach. We're just going to go build something because you need feedback. I feel like that's a good idea. It's like agile. Get feedback, build something. But what I think is the problem here is that you need to build you need to kind of come up with a good hypothesis that is credible, right? You have a good hypothesis. You're like, okay, I think I know my client. This is what my client wants, right? But you can never know for sure. So build it quickly, even if it's a rough prototype, and put it in front of the client, right? That's the lean part. You strip it down to only basic features, right? So you're keeping it lean, but your hypothesis is credible, right? And some people have misunderstood lean. They think it's just like an authorization to build whatever and put it in front of clients just to learn. It's like, oh, this is build whatever, like they did in this company. It's like, how did they even come up with this UI, right? And they were told by the managers, just imagine what a data scientist would want. And they'd never met a data scientist, I think. And they just imagined what they do. And they went all the way, like front end, UI, there was a back end, all different teams managing each component for like a tiny product. It was insane. And I've seen it a little too many times now.
Yeah, just dropping millions of dollars in salary without a destination.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy. But from a junior developer perspective, like somebody who's trying to get into the field, one of the things I struggle with is that you and I know that there's a lot of poor employer choices that you could make and projects you could get on. But I also realize and recognize that experience in this field is king. And sometimes early on, you just have to take that crappy job just to get the experience on your CV. But if you're looking out at what's going on in this marketplace and you're thinking about somebody who's coming in fresh into the field, what are some signs you would look for that I should treat this employer as a job, not as something I should invest myself emotionally in?
I think the word value proposition comes to my mind. whatever you do, even if you want to be a fully technical software developer, you don't care about business, learn about what a value proposition is, because a lot of businesses have no clue about what their value proposition is. A value proposition means that problem you're actually solving for people, that thing that adds value, and you need to know who your client is very precisely when you define your value proposition. And I've seen companies that, we help auditors of compliance for the financial industry who evaluate whether our advertising meets guidelines. Super, super dull, horrible thing, but you know who they are. And now we help them by using AI to do this and that, right? For example, okay, they know who the client is, they know kind of what they're helping them with, and you also want to see that they know what the pain is that the client is going through and why this is going to help them. This is very basic stuff, and you would think every business out there knows this. But if you ever, you interview with this company and you need a job, I've been in that position, right? You need a job, especially now that everybody got fired, right? It's not just Twitter employees, it's everybody else is getting fired from the technology industry. If your employer sounds like we're doing something with AI to help data centers save energy, and you're like, okay, but why? Why do you want to help them save energy? Oh, because AI is all the rage now, so they're probably consuming a lot of energy. And you realize the person saying this has never been to a data center. They don't know what they do inside. They don't know how they work. They just think of, and this is how, unfortunately, a lot of businesses start in technology or in even projects within companies. It's like, we could do something to optimize this. Because AI is cool, data centers might be getting hot right now because of all the processing. So they don't know who the client is, because they don't know if the client is the manager of the data center who is there, like the janitor, person operating things, or if it's the owner of the data center, or if it's the company that invested in the data center, or if it's the actual owner of the real estate. They have no clue who they are. And it's hard to sell when you don't know who that person is, because sometimes the user is not the same as the buyer. So if you get the impression that a business knows who the client is, what problem they're solving, all good. If you see that that's not the case, I would advise you to steer clear, or like you said, well, this is a job for now. Yeah, my impression is that usually never ends well. And you're not going to hear this from a lot of people. Because investors, VCs, they're going to tell you, you need to experiment. Doesn't matter if you don't know. Doesn't matter if you don't know the industry. People like, the creators of Airbnb were not experts in hospitality. And they're going to show you all these exceptions but that's not how it usually works.
Yeah, that's usually survivor bias.
Probably survivor bias. Yeah. And there's a book called Value Proposition Design that I really like. It's kind of a very friendly book with lots of drawings. Learned something very quickly. I enjoyed that book a lot because it taught me about the process of, identifying pains, identifying who your customer is. Very, very valuable for a business. And it sounds obvious, but a lot of them are not doing it. And I think that those are the businesses that you should maybe stay away from. And another kind of business I would stay away from is the one, because there's a lot of AI businesses, going around. Any business that relies on 100% accuracy of AI or 100% reliability. And that's what they're promising to the clients. That's not going to work, right? So AI hallucinates. Nobody knows how to solve that, which means that if your business presents itself as a tool to help or support the decisions of lawyers, that's okay. If they present themselves as, we're going to write the contracts for you, that's not going to work. The lawyers are going to see problems, they're going to complain, they're not going to so acknowledging the limitations of technology, of AI, but just in technology in general is a good start, right? So if you're working for and that's why I refused to work in the self-driving car industry. This was back in 2017. And I was in a position of privilege because I actually had other choices. So I didn't have to do this if, I need a job. I actually got a job, as something else. But I refused to even interview for the companies that were calling me for self-driving cars because I knew that it was impossible to build a self-driving car, or at least a fully autonomous one, the way they were saying it was possible, And I was like, no. Not going to happen because of hallucinations. I knew how it worked. I just finished my PhD on AI stuff for image processing, which means that I was kind of an appealing candidate for it. So I got a few phone calls, and I was like, nope, not going to work in this field. And the reason was that I felt like they're not acknowledging the limitations. If the company had approached me to say, look, we're building autonomous cars that will drive themselves within a farm, perfectly mapped out path, and we're going to help farmers do it. Maybe. But these people were like, in 2 years, we'll have self-driving cars everywhere in the world. And I'm like, I was living in Nice at the time in France, and it's the worst traffic you've ever seen in your life. And there's scooters everywhere because traffic is so bad. People who don't want to drive, it's just like using a scooter to go. And I'm like,
yeah, they're like driving between the cars and
yes.
doing dangerous things.
Exactly.
And,
That's what when they teach you how to be aware of your blind spots in the car, like you literally have to, because there's always like a scooter in your blind spot, And I lived on a street where essentially the entire road, it was actually one road between two mountains, right? A very long road with lots and lots of buildings, but only a single road because it's literally between mountains, so you can't go up. And there's not enough room for all the cars. So how do people park? They literally double park illegally. That's not allowed. They'll double park overnight. Everybody double parks. And they just write down their phone number on a Post-it note. So people will just, you just call whoever is the owner of the car to move it if they're blocking your car. And it's like the mess this is. And, and I'm like, how AI will ever be able to account for all the edge cases, the long tail of events, which is AI is pretty bad at, right? It's good at, at common situations, but when I drove there, everything was an uncommon situation. Something you'd never seen every single day. And I was like, this is a limitation that people are not acknowledging when they say self-driving cars will be everywhere.
I think I saw an article somewhat recently that said that Waymo, that they have like 2 operators in a data center or something monitoring their cars for every car they have on the road. So it's like you guys haven't even replaced drive. You've actually added more drivers technically.
Yeah. So the news was that they have 1.5 people employed at a control room per car on the streets. I think that was Cruise. Waymo also revealed they have a control room. We don't know how many people, but we know interventions, manual operations take place every 2 to 5 miles of driving. So regardless of the numbers, some people say they could have just hired drivers instead of spending 200 billion on developing this technology, which doesn't work. It's all fake. Yeah. I mean, not all fake, but the idea that it would be fully self-driving. But I was walking down the park the other day, and this friend of mine told me, "Oh no, but this year it's happening. This year Elon will actually produce a self-driving car." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "But he's been saying that for how long?"
Yeah.
No, but this time it's real.
Yeah. We're supposed to be having this conversation in the metaverse right now, and
I know, right?
And if we are, and if you were being paid, which you're not, I'd be sending you Bitcoin.
Right.
That's the world we predicted. Mm-hmm. But one of the things you said, I kind of want to go back to, because I'm a big fan that even if AI tools get way better at coding, I think that having coding skills and having the skills of a software engineer is one of the better paths in that future towards entrepreneurship, because you'll be able to control your operations and work collaboratively with these tools if they get good enough to warrant that. But one of the things you said in your last part here was about boring companies and boring problems. And it made me think of something early in my career when I started my first business. I was in a startup accelerator in Akron, Ohio. And if you've ever spent any time in an incubator, there's a lot of people coming and going that have ideas. Some of them get a little bit of seed money and they start working on their idea. But most startups do fail, and they fail pretty quickly. But the one startup when I was at this incubator that did very well, and they did not take on any venture capital, and they made tens of millions of dollars, was working with waste and recycling companies. And you talk about the most boring problem in the world, just dealing with scrap, dealing with waste, making sure it gets sorted, making sure all the environmental regulations are followed, and things like that. And these guys just made tens and tens of millions of dollars in that really boring space. And it's something I'm constantly telling to students. And when I go talk at colleges and stuff, I'm like, you don't want to build an app. Building an app on the App Store is incredibly risky. You want to go find something that is boring and painful and fix that.
Yeah. I think, we could talk about this for hours, because I've been speaking about the boring company thing for a long time. There are many things here. So one of them, most of the successful entrepreneurs I've met, that's what they've done. It's always the same story. They found a real problem in a field that they knew, because the people who did this waste and recycling thing, they did that because probably someone knew something from the inside, right? That's where the low-hanging fruit is, right? Because let's speak of what building a business means. And we're talking not just a business, a successful business. financially. It means that you get a good ROE, return on equity, considering the amount of money I put in, how much do I get, right? Every year, the profit, how does it compare to the amount of money I put in, right? It's not about the profit. It's the profit compared to all the effort and the money that you put in. And if you want it to be large, there needs to be kind of some mysterious thing that hasn't been done that is low-hanging fruit. Otherwise, someone would have picked it up, right? And those opportunities usually, they remain unseen because they are in a niche industry where, insiders don't know how to solve the problem, don't even know this can be solved, And then someone who knows a little bit more about technology, they're like, okay, but they know that industry. They're like, okay, this is an opportunity. There's low-hanging fruit in here. And I've met a lot of successful people, and the pattern is usually the same. They start selling that thing very quickly because they are connected within the industry, and they get people to pay for it because they have their contacts. They're like, look, I'm solving your problem. There's a queue of people, a line of people waiting to pay for it, even before it's been launched. And then they're thinking of raising, venture capital, but then they're like, okay, but I'm already profitable. I met a business that they canceled a fundraising round because they're like, why am I going to do that? And it was this kind of thing, the boring thing. And these people, they become millionaires. They don't become billionaires. They don't build the next Facebook, but they do build the next multi-million-dollar business on software for garbage collection or for the aerospace industry. I discovered, when they launch a rocket, let's say they're going to launch a rocket, the ground logistics are pretty messy. And I know a person who was working in this field, and he noticed that parts went missing. They coordinated the whole process by using Excel spreadsheets. So it's like the most sophisticated thing in the world. And he built a solution to help this industry, which he knew very well. And he was successful very quickly. This is the pattern that I've seen 1,000 times. And you know what? It's not boring when you have people who use your software and they like it and you get feedback. It stops being boring. I had a chat a few weeks ago with a person this person that I know who resigned from a very sexy job at a very sexy startup that isn't really working very well. Product isn't successful. And she left and she joined a boring company, also a technology company, but a boring company. And I think that company has all the characteristics of a successful business that will stand the test of time because it's solving a real problem. And I think it was a good move to do that.
I just saw it over and over, and I even find myself as a technology professional, even when I'm out and about in public, like if I go to the dentist office, like I'm always trying to sneak a peek of the software they're using just to look at it, and I can't tell you how many times I see successful businesses that are doing things that are absolutely critical to society functioning, like garbage collection and things like that. Yeah. And I look at their software and I'm like, oh my God, you're using that? That looks like something out of 1990. Like what's like?
You know that here in Europe, I don't know in the US, but in Europe, all the aircraft maintenance records are kept on paper. They literally have boxes with paper. No, it's not digitalized. And the whole aviation industry works that way. Very, very old-fashioned. And I've met people who have built solutions for airports, for example, that do something completely obvious and necessary that improves operations, and they make a lot of money from it. And you're like, how wasn't this done before? Nobody's looking at those, because maybe it's true. Maybe you're not going to make billions. You're not going to build a new Facebook. The size of your market is smaller, but that's what works. I've seen it 1,000 times. That's what works business-wise, and it's a pity also, I think, that not enough resources are devoted to those things, right? Because they're not shiny. I've had a few conversations with people that tell me that bubbles, economic bubbles, are good. Look at all the good things that come out of a bubble. And one discussion I had that I remember vividly was WeWork. WeWork was a terrible business that had severe flaws that were really visible, right? It was a real estate business disguised as a technology startup. Didn't make any sense. It pretty much collapsed in an obvious way. And then someone was trying to convince me that it was great, though. The whole thing was worth it because that's how you innovate. Because thanks to that experiment, now the industry of real estate or office spaces has changed. We're now all used to much nicer office spaces, look with a fancy coffee machine. And also the business model has changed because now we can buy office space in a fractional way as opposed to just renting the office, just rent a desk. So WeWork did probably influence the industry a lot. But I think something's removed from that equation, which is what is the opportunity cost of this? So all the people who worked for WeWork what could have they done instead with that time, right? You've got engineers working because they're building internal apps. They also were saying they were using some sort of AI or fancy stuff to design the offices. So you have a lot of brain power doing that. Now, maybe some of these people would have invented some sort of nuclear reactor that would have make energy production more efficient, right? So we always need to consider the downside of all this craziness that we see in technology. And that's what makes me think when I see all these airports operating so inefficiently using paper spreadsheets and stuff, or paper forms. I'm thinking, well, maybe the person who could have built this and actually reduce delays or make aviation more efficient, maybe they were working on Juicero, or WeWork.
And speaking of airports, I mean, one of the most successful guys I ever met was the guy who his team actually invented the automated check-in kiosk at the airport for your tickets. Yeah. And the story he tells is that, he was standing there in the long queue waiting for the agent to be able to scan his ticket in or punch it in. It was all manual back in the day. And he said he started talking to the people around him. He was like, wouldn't this be nicer if there was just like a automated thing? And everybody was like, oh, that would be amazing. Right. And then the wheels started turning and he started that company and he made mega money. Just a very basic, almost obvious problem.
Yeah. And another thing that you need to consider when you analyze a business opportunity, right, is the competitive advantage, which some people call the moat, as an MOAT, which is that thing that prevents competitors from eroding your market share, right? Because if you launch a business that everybody will do the same, profit becomes really, really low. And then again, your ROE, you would have been better off by putting your money in an index fund, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to make more money. And when you look at businesses like that, they often have a very big moat from the fact that airports are very slow to improve. Mm-hmm. So once you've been the person who saw that and you built all these kiosks and installed it in multiple airports with multiple airlines, they have a switching cost afterward, right? They're not going to redo the work with another provider because it's cheaper, right? So you end up kind of locking in. If you go quickly, you end up locking in a lot of the market, and it's very, very hard for them to pick another provider, right? Yeah. And the switching cost is one of the most important things. It doesn't bring you new clients necessarily, but it helps you lock in. And a lot of these boring industries or boring problems have this feature. Yeah,
it almost becomes an annuity because it's so hard to get out once.
I mean, look, I've heard people say that the reason SAP is so ugly, and I've never used it actually, but they say it's terrible on every level.
It is. I can tell you it is.
The reason they can afford to be terrible is that clients don't want to switch to anything new because it would be such a pain to switch. Yeah. Right. And that's the switching cost. And I urge everybody who wants to launch a business, even a small one, to think, what is your moat? It could be a switching cost. It could be, and I think another one that's very, very important in the technology industry is the surge cost. And this is me saying this. So it's basically, I'm importing a term from microeconomics and applying it to this. I need to write a book about this one day. But I've done a lot of thinking. And I think the surge cost means I don't want to make the effort of looking for anything else. Mm-hmm. And that is what Canva benefits from. Some businesses in the technology industry, they have the power to become household names like WD-40. And if you've used Canva before and you stop using it, like me, right now I'm not using Canva. But the other day I wanted to create a thumbnail for my YouTube video. So what did I do? Did I go and search for options to see how I could do it? No, I went to Canva, right? Because that's what I know. The reason this happens is that it's very cheap. You can't benefit from a switching cost if you're an expensive product, like super premium stuff. But a lot of companies, they offer kind of a cheap product where people are not going to go through mental effort and they don't see options. It's not like you go to the supermarket and you see alternatives to Canva. And I think this is also another thing to watch out for. When you're analyzing businesses or job opportunities, see so I was telling you the story earlier of this person who was leaving a fancy startup and went to a boring business. This boring business is totally, and you know the business, I'm not going to tell you who they are, but it's this kind of business where we all know the name. That's what we use. Cheap solution, but we're not going to go and search for alternatives. And I was like, this business is protected probably for a very long time from competitors, right? Yeah, I think this is good if you're again, a junior developer. You need to read these cues. Does the business have a switching cost? Does it have a surge cost? Does it have a network effect? That's the other one, right? The big one. I can tell you things that do not count. And again, another reason to steer clear of a business. Technological complexity or technological superiority is not a moat. No. If your business it builds a difficult product or a complex product, that everybody else can do it. If it's a good idea, someone will get money from an investor to do the same. And one company suffering from that problem maybe is OpenAI actually. Because everybody knows kind of how to build a sort of chat GPT, right? We may not know all the details, but the underlying technology was not even invented by them. It was invented by Google and published in a scientific paper. And the fact that ChatGPT is so potentially complicated and I spend so much money on developing it doesn't mean anything. You got these guys, these French guys. Well, we need to build a competitor to ChatGPT in Europe. And they create Mistral, this company, right? And they got hundreds of millions in investment to do that. And it's doing pretty well. And the models that they create are doing pretty well in terms of producing a product. And then you have DeepSeek and the whole debacle with DeepSeek. And we all knew that was going to happen. Someone was going to build an equally capable or very close model compared to those of OpenAI. OpenAI does not have a moat protecting the business. And that's where they're kind of trying to do the marketplace for GPTs, because they're kind of trying to create a network effect, but it's not working. In terms of, like I said, the search cost, yes, we do go to ChatGPT, but the premium version, they're starting to charge a lot for some of their products. And I think when people are like, am I going to pay $200 a month? Maybe you will shop a little bit around. You'll see if Gemini could do the same job, or And I think I would tell the younger me, I would be like, analyze businesses in terms of, do they have a moat? And a real one, not technological sophistication, like a real thing that kind of keeps customers engaged and they just don't look away.
Yeah, because the one thing about technology is that it does become cheaper over time. And that's just a fundamental law of economics at this point. Yeah. So, you might get that early mover advantage, but I often see that the second mover is usually the one that reaps most of the profits, because the technology gets cheaper, the problem gets understood, and they can stand up and compete with you faster than you could with much less investment. And the OpenAI thing is really interesting to me as a technology professional, because I look at them and I see that they're on track to lose like $18 billion this year, and they're charging people $200 a month for Pro. And I'm sitting here as a technology professional, and I know that there's open source models, and my thought immediately goes to, what would that cost have to be before I would just set up my own servers in a data center, throw an open source model on it, and just run everything locally? And for me personally, it's not that high, because for personal use, I mean, how much would I spend to jury rig like 4 high-end video cards in a rack somewhere, throw the biggest DeepSeek model on it, and go to town just for me? I don't think that would cost more than $5,000, maybe $10,000 at most if I wanted to build like a behemoth rig. So that tells me immediately that for a sophisticated tech user who is probably their premium customer, they can't charge more than $400 a month, $500 a month before I'm just going to be like, you know what?
I'll do it myself. Yeah.
I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
So I feel like they're hard capped on how much they can charge.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem.
And we'll see where it goes. We'll see what happens in a few years, I think. But I'm not saying OpenAI will fail, but it will have to find a way, in terms of strategy, to survive. And that will need to be building some sort of moat or competitive advantage. And owning a certain chatbot will not do that.
Right. And I actually think, as a business person, I think the most likely thing is all of these startup companies that are building wrappers around the frontier models, they're basically doing the market research for OpenAI. And it would be trivial at some point for OpenAI to say, you know what? Here's your meeting assistant bot that's going to record all your meetings and summarize them for you. Yeah. And now you're in the ecosystem. It becomes part of your subscription. And those companies, I've been screaming about that on LinkedIn from time to time. I'm like, you have no moat.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. They could build it, though, if they spy into what people are doing, right? And what they're using it for. Because they're like, that's a good point. They will have to build those other products based on the information that they have, right? That's maybe the value of OpenAI, where it comes from, all the information that they have in terms of the conversations with people with ChatGPT, to kind of identify the specific use cases. But then we'll see anyway, because if what they end up doing is building a wrapper, which is like write a long prompt and run it through our own models, people can actually do that too.
Yeah.
Outside OpenAI, they can use DeepSeek or Mistral or any of those open source models with wraparound.
Well, and I'm thinking about the businesses, and there is a price you'll pay for convenience. Mm-hmm. So if you are in the OpenAI walled garden and they do have all these sophisticated GPTs, that OpenAI, I still believe they'll eventually just own them all. They'll just do it and push out the people that were early adopters. But there is a price you'll pay for convenience. Like if you buy the OpenAI enterprise package and you get
access to all of these features.
You get access to all these features. Like it still would cost you time, testing, etc. to set all these things up. And there may be a model there, but
but will it be worth billions?
Probably not.
We'll see. I think it will be worth less than what they imagine, probably. Yeah.
I think so too. But
I have that impression. But we'll see what they figure out. That's the thing with the fun part of business strategy, right? You need to kind of plan this ahead of time and do it in a sly way and adapt over time because the market changes. We'll see where it goes. I'm very curious.
So let's talk a bit about your career then in a little more detail. Like, you got a lot of things going on. You've done consulting. You've worked for companies. You've written books. Like, on your personal path, like, how do you balance like managing your career and having a job versus maintaining your independence so that, like you just talked about, like I had the opportunity, the ability to turn down positions. Like, how does somebody who's young and maybe not super socially adaptable yet, or well networked, how do they look at their career to get to where you are, where you can have influence and have choice and freedom?
I hope I have that. I'm not sure. Even now when everybody's getting fired, nobody can find a coding job apparently anymore. It's probably not true, but I'm like, would I be affected? If I wanted to, will I struggle to find projects myself? I don't know what's going on in the market, but so I think that one of the things that has helped me has been to be at the intersection of business and technology. Mm-hmm. I've always done the technology part, I focus on the technology part. But one thing that I did very early on, and I actively did this, was to work on projects where I could measure the business impact of what I did very directly. Because this is very easy to sell. When you say in your CV, I helped the company save this much money using machine learning, it's very different from saying I have 3 years of experience with TensorFlow. They love impact. When I used to work for Expedia, I worked there. I helped develop algorithms that put together travel packages. It was the revenue team. So we basically decided how much you would charge for a package. You have quite a lot of freedom as a travel agent to charge different things for packages. You can't do that for a standalone piece of, like if you're selling a hotel room, then, the hotel tells you how much you're going to charge for it. Maybe you can have a little bit of wiggle room. But with a package, you have a lot more freedom. And we were the team that was using, machine learning to learn from past experience to say what's the optimal way of charging for these packages. And we processed millions of requests a minute. Millions and millions, because it's not just Expedia. Expedia sells packages to a whole network of other travel agencies. They're all connected. So it was insane from a technological point of view. The writing code that you can see needs to be super efficient because it's going to be used millions of times a minute even. But there was the business side, which is that we could actually measure in terms of money how much money we were bringing to the company. And I think at that point, when I was choosing the path, I like that industry, kind of the travel industry, and I was excited about it. Sounds like it's all about money, right? I did enjoy the fact that I could measure at least very well the business impact. And there was another thing that I did at that point that was a lot of fun from the geeky point of view. A lot of fun. I'm going to tell you what it is in a second. But it was also very valuable from the business side, which is the best place to be when you can actually be a nerd and add business value. And so the story is that you don't always want to make the most money when you're selling tickets or whatever. It's not about making the most money, because very often you want to develop a certain market. You want to actually be cheap because you have salespeople that have negotiated deals with agents, and they're like, we want to preserve our relationship with partners. that happens. It's like if you've been selling a specific package at a certain price for a long time, and then you realize, what, we could increase the price. Do you actually want to? Do you want your customers to see a change? You want to. So there are lots of business questions. It's not just about and it was very, very geeky and very mathematical. I worked in constrained optimization. So it's, okay, how can we use all the data that we have to be able to let's try to make money subject to business constraints, which means that business people and like salespeople could have an input in our system. They could tell us what they wanted in terms of business goals, right? And they were very happy because we heard we got their input. Otherwise, we didn't even have approved the deployment of our system. So I feel like on the one hand, I did something really geeky, very mathematical. Mathematical optimization is a lot of fun, all of these really, really geeky derivatives and stuff. But at the same time, you're working on a really crucial business problem. And now this was it looked very good in my CV to having done this, right? I had a lot and I formulated my CV in that way. I'm going to show the business value that I added. And I think that people appreciated that a lot afterward. Yeah, that's one thing I would do, because I think it gives you a lot of versatility in the future, right? If you want, again, like if you want to be able to choose different paths, or if you want to have more resilience to the whole, ups and downs, or like people getting fired. When you're that person that was at that intersection between business and technology, I think you have higher chances of being resilient. Yeah. I don't know if that's answers your question anyway.
That actually kind of mirrors my career, because I was always into tech and computers, and my dad got us a Commodore 64 back in the day, and I immediately started, once I learned I could code it, I started playing with really simple programs. I was like 10, so they were just very simple go-to games, text adventure type stuff. And I got to college, and I immediately enrolled in computer science, because I thought, well, that's just the natural extension of what I want to do. But I already knew enough about computers and coding that I wasn't really getting a lot out of my computer science classes. Okay. And I really didn't like the auxiliary engineering stuff. Like, I really wasn't into physics at all. I really wasn't into electronics and circuitry at all. And I looked across the campus, and I saw over in the business college there was an information systems program, and that had programming and databases, so it was still technical, but the electives were not physics and electronics and chemistry. The electives were marketing and accounting and finance and sales, and I ended up switching degrees. So I don't have a computer science degree. I have an information systems degree. But when I got into my first job and I worked on a team that had to interact with business users, and I did a lot of work in finance and insurance and things like that, I quickly learned that because I understood the business stakeholders, it just shot my career like a rocket, because all of a sudden those stakeholders, when we would have strategy meetings, when we would have discussions about what to do next quarter, they wanted me in the room because I understood them. And I could break down the technology and translate it into a business value. And that's what they were really concerned about. And it's just like within 3 years, I'm leading a team, I'm doing consulting work, and I felt completely underqualified to do it. But I looked around at my peers, and they loved the tech, but they were not interested in the business.
Yeah. And do you think you would recommend people to try to be more interested in the business, or is it like a thing that you just can't change? Like if you're not into it, you're not into it.
I think there's a little bit of that, but I do think that, especially the way the world has changed and the way AI and technology, I think that being more of a generalist is going to be better than being a specialist in the long run. Yeah. But you can't fake interest either.
Yeah, and I feel like from what I've seen, even the geekiest of people, I have the impression that they do want impact of their work. They want people to use what they're doing. And I think they do care about business at the end of the day. It's rare to find someone that they just want to program and I don't care. Sometimes they don't have the elements though, because you don't learn about business in computer science school. Right? You wouldn't do that. Nobody teaches you anything. At least it wasn't the case with me. So maybe you don't have the elements. Yeah. But I have the impression that I've seen physicists convert into, let's say, data science or stuff like that, and they learn how to program, and they become very passionate about the technical side. But I've seen them learn a lot about business and starting to really enjoy, the impact so I've seen that even from people who were, hardcore kind of quantum physics person, it's not everyone though, it needs to be a bit of everything.
For years when I have people who are early career or mid-career and they come and talk to me and they say, well, what should I learn next? What should I get good at? They're almost always thinking in IT, they're almost always thinking about tech. They're just like, should I learn, more about machine learning? Should I learn about these things? And I'm always like, yeah, that's really good. But how's your writing? How's your presentation skills? How's your sales?
Yeah. And they tend to be terrible at that. Like look, I went to a talk that my boss gave in front of an audience about my work. Okay. And I couldn't follow it. I got lost when my boss explained my work because she was very bad explaining this. And I think that, and sometimes they understand each other very well, because they hold the technical thing, and sometimes I've seen a lot of, when they give presentations that are a little bit mathematical, they define epsilon or delta, and then 3 slides later they tell you, because obviously 3 times delta is this, and I'm like, I don't even remember what was delta. Like, you remember? I don't know what delta was. So they get, and I feel like that's very important too. And I've always said that my favorite skill is not my programming or my machine learning knowledge, it's my communication, because I genuinely like speaking, and people tend to appreciate my presentations. Like, they say that they tend to follow them nicely, or that I can communicate sometimes complicated stuff in a simple language. And I think that's not coincidental. It's something I've learned, it's not like and I think, I wish people could do it more or focus more on that. Because I think it's very, very important. And writing is really difficult. I'm a writer, and I can tell you, AI can't do it. Anybody who thinks that AI can do it, it can't, because you think that writing is about the grammar, or it's not. And it's not just about writing books, it's about writing even corporate, emails. You want to find the best way to communicate a message. And that's so hard. And that's what I spend so much time doing when I write books. I don't care about the grammar, an editor, a human editor will actually go through it, but even AI could help, and it does help with the grammar. But how do you know if a story is fun to tell? How do you know if someone's getting bored? And I've learned a lot, in the beginning. Look, when I wrote my book on AI, my first book on AI, I have a second one now. The first book, I kind of wanted to speak about the AI hype. I was going to say, this is overhyped, this is not. And my approach was that I wrote a really whiny book. That was like proper Karen, everybody knows the good side of AI, because we all know that, it's obvious. So I'm just going to frame the book. I'm going to tell you the other side that nobody tells you about. And I was like, this is a lie. And what I did, thank God, was I ran the book by beta readers, which are people who help you, early on, they give you feedback about your early draft. And a lot of feedback was, great content, I hate the tone. The tone is whiny. Why are you, Obviously, it depends on the audience. Some people do a great job at complaining or being aggressive, but that wasn't the people I was speaking to, right? I could course correct. Now I've learned, so in my books, I don't do that anymore. I'm not I try to show the 2 sides of the story. I try to let people draw their own conclusions. I'm not going to say this is this, maybe I'll just show you the evidence. Obviously, I do have an opinion about things. That's why, I'm telling you this. But, I will respect your, you. I'm not going to be like, this is stupid. And I've learned about this, and it applies to everything. It applies to work. I also remember within a company, when you work for a company, I remember I had a colleague that was she complained a lot about things that were objectively wrong. They were terrible, it made no sense. But she never actually proposed a solution. And I observed how that worked, and I kind of learned from that people didn't respond that way. They didn't respond to that. They said, yeah, but nothing happened. And at one point with another colleague, we also saw that problem she was complaining so much about, and we were like, this needs to be solved. But we kind of proposed a solution. So then we went to the upper management of the company. We're like, look, this is terrible, but it can be fixed this way. And they were so much more receptive. We actually got to fix it. And I wish there was a manual somewhere where they can, we can learn all those things. And I feel all these skills are so much more important than the coding at the end of the day, because this other girl, she was super good at her job, but she couldn't actually get the work done because nobody really gave her the resources to fix what was broken. And that was all down to communication, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's all very important. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually one of my projects I'm working on for Skill Foundry right now is a professional skills series. Mm-hmm. Just teaching people how to survive, how to communicate, and mm-hmm. you just reminded me that one of my topics that I'm working on is saying yes but.
Okay.
That's how I've learned to work with stakeholders and get my ideas, because they'll come to you and they say, well, we want to do this. And you don't want to just crap on their idea, because then people get defensive, they close off, they're not gonna be receptive to your feedback. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of trained myself over time to say, yes, we could absolutely do that. But have you considered this? Mm-hmm. Have you thought about this edge case?
Yeah.
How are you going to handle and I found it early on that telling people what to do doesn't work well with a good subset of the population. But asking questions.
That makes me think maybe we technologists were wired a little bit differently, right? We are a little bit, too geeky. So maybe we are, and we do a lot of maths and, if this, that, when you're coding. So maybe we are okay with someone telling, this doesn't work, right? No, this doesn't work. And not everyone's like that, right? Not everyone's like that. And I think it's a language that I've worked a lot with physicists in my career. And I think you can be very blunt because it's equations. Oh no, this doesn't follow from this. It's okay. Yeah. But that's not necessarily going to happen. And you reminded me of I went to the gym with a friend. We were doing different things, but at one point I just looked at him and he was doing bicep curls, but the form was terrible. He was like, what the hell is this? So I told him something like, oh, your bicep curls look like shit. You need to improve them. Watch like a YouTube video or something. He didn't say anything, but then he was offended by it. He kind of let me know that he was kind of like, I was a bit like upset about it. And I thought to myself, what, if someone told me your bicep curls look like shit, maybe I would have been like, oh, really? Okay, thank you. But again, like not everyone operates that way. And I think that when you go to computer science school, the classes are it's an exact science, so you're not used to that kind of other side of things. Yeah.
This is interesting because I would actually think like the nature of anybody who's experienced programming, you're wrong all the time. And you change your mind all the time when you first start building something, when you first start exploring a domain. Like I can't even tell you how many times I've gotten partway through a solution and just realized all of a sudden this isn't going to be good, and I have to scrap it and start over. And that's just a common thing. So like when you're talking to other IT people, it can sometimes be okay to be like, no, that'd never work, and here's why. And they're just used to things not working out, and that's fine. Right. But in different fields, that may not be the case.
True. Yeah. We've spent entire nights trying to debug something, right? Mm-hmm. Have you?
Oh yeah, I've burnt the midnight oil, especially. I've learned not to push to production on a Friday. That's something everybody goes through, right? I actually have a YouTube video on my channel where one time I wrote a bad SQL join and I double billed a whole bunch of customers. And then I was up all night writing a custom script to connect to the payment processor and refund all those transactions. And then I had to go to the managers and I had to tell them what happened, and we had to send out letters because they're going to see the double charges and then the refund, and we have to explain that to them. Yeah, I learned a lesson about testing.
Oh yeah, and I think this is not to sound cocky, but I think it's happening less and less to me, a lot less over time, because over the years, and I think that's what kind of turns me into a senior engineer. That's the leap, when you become like a senior elite engineer, is that I've learned so much to implement all the possible things I can implement to prevent that from happening, that I actually spend more time testing, And I try to never reinvent the wheel, like always use libraries that have been really tested. I try to write the least code actually myself, the least custom code. And if I do, I tested myself very thoroughly. And I think I haven't had those sleepless nights for a very long time because of that. It does happen from time to time, but it's that, that you make a super big mistake, but it's super unfortunate. It's like, the most unfortunate thing happened. It's like that thing that you hadn't tested, that nobody would ever test because you would never, ever change that file, ever. But you did change that file, like, somehow. Or unfortunate incident we had recently was that, in Python you can have the same code twice. Like, you can have two different functions with the same name.
Yes.
Right, which you wouldn't be allowed to do in Java, but in Python you can just overwrite. An engineer in the company, he rewrote the whole thing, but the other code was left in there, and he was kind of using the old code, and it was all very unfortunate because all the tests were passing and stuff, and then all the tests were fine because the old code was reading some environment variables that we still had, but they weren't needed anymore. So at one point I removed the environment variables from my environment, so this is not needed. We always thought the new code was being used, and then all of a sudden everything collapses. And we only found out at that point, I think we could have done something like, even to make sure the code doesn't have, because there are tools, to verify you don't have the same function twice, which you can put in your pipeline and stuff. And we didn't, because it was like, I don't know, it was a whole series of unfortunate events. And he was like, what the hell is going on? Like, we've had this code live for a long time. Like, why does it crash now? But I feel like it happens less and less. And I think that as you evolve as an engineer, these things need to happen only due to really unfortunate circumstances. It's not going to stop happening probably, but it needs to be unfortunate. It makes me feel a bit weird about the whole thing of SpaceX having like its sixth rocket explode. Because I'm like, shouldn't you be very sure that it's not going to explode? And explosions should be something very exceptional that happened because of some unfortunate event. Like, shouldn't it be validating things more? You shouldn't do like test and learn with rockets, I think. But I think with software it's the same. And another thing I see with AI is people saying, I'm gonna just use AI to write your unit tests. Writing unit tests is painful, but I love that pain because the reason I write a unit test is that I go manually using a paper and I calculate what the output of my function should be. And in some cases it's been really annoying. For example, with the time zones, when you're like, I'm going to write an example of what the output should be of this on that day of the year, and with the day lasts 25 hours because of the end of summertime. So I go and I write the test, and it's super annoying to do all the calculations, and I do them by hand, and then I put that in my unit test, right? And then I find a junior developer in a company just running his code, checking out what the output is, and then created a unit test that verifies if the output is that thing that came out of the output. So essentially, he's writing tests to validate his own code, which was wrong, right? But the test passes. And I'm okay, but with AI, even from a cognitive point of view, aren't we removing a very important part of the process when you just like, I'll get AI to write the unit tests? Because what if the unit tests are wrong? Like, the whole point of writing unit tests was for you as a human being to see what should the output be, And I know it's painful to do things by hand, but I do like it because it's actually that's where I really specify what my algorithm should do. If I were an engineer, again, in the beginning of my career, I would try to learn all these good practices very well because I feel like people are dodging them a little too easily with AI, and it's not going to end well. And a way to distinguish yourself as an engineer is to actually follow good principles, because that may set you apart from all the people using AI or like this, like you said before, like enshittification of things,
Yeah, I'm actually teaching a class right now live for a financial company everybody's heard of, and they're bringing on junior entry-level Java developers. Mm-hmm. So, and this is something I've done through my whole career. I really enjoy teaching, and I teach beginning coders. That's kind of what I do. It's always interesting to me because when we're doing demos in the classroom and we'll come up with some scenario or a novel problem, and I'll sit down and I'll start banging out code and writing tests and everything. And inevitably the students will look at me and they're just like, how do you do that so fast? And I always have to, because of the imposter syndrome thing that's so common in our field, I always have to tell them, like, I'm not smarter than you. It's just my experience. I can immediately, you guys all know at this point that there are many ways to solve a problem with code. Some of them are more optimal than others, but there's many ways to approach a problem. I have enough scars that I can discard a whole subset of potential solutions because I know that they're not going to work out well. Yeah. And that's what, when you say a senior developer is 10x more productive than a junior, it's not because we're smarter than you. It's just we know a lot more about what's not going to work, and we don't have to spend any time thinking about it.
Exactly. I feel like my
most of my job is not writing code. It's actually finding which tool to use, discarding options. That's the thing I do. It's like I needed to calculate the amount of radiation, solar radiation that you get based on the angle of the sun. And it's all a lot of trigonometry. And I immediately knew, like, I'm going to use a library that must exist to do this, right? I'm not going to go, and I actually asked ChatGPT, and there were different options, right? It did write down a formula. I didn't ask ChatGPT at the moment. I did it after the fact because I was curious. But it gave me a formula. It gave me libraries that it used in the wrong way. But anyway, my job at that point was like, I'm going to use a library. There must be something. And there were actually a few. But then based on my experience, I could see, the documentation they have, and I can kind of gauge, this one, it may be buggy. There will be problems. And I can see this one looks super professional. Look at the community it has around it. You can see even the design of, like, how do you use it? It's a very simple task. I never thought I'm going to go and code this from scratch, or I didn't pick the first library I saw because I saw a couple that were a bit problematic. And I think that that's kind of my job all the time. It's to pick the best tool to use. And I feel like 90% of my coding work is configuring libraries, configuring things. It's not reinventing the wheel. The other 10% is really hardcore coding that is so custom. I can't do it with AI because it would take me longer to explain to AI what I need to do because it's so custom. And all the rest, do I really need AI to configure Django? Have you ever used Django? It's like super easy. Like, do I really need it's transparent, to use. And I think, discarding things, thinking all the things that could go wrong. I've recently been involved in securing software. And I think that there's a lot of stuff you learn, the textbook way. You learn about encryption algorithms and stuff, but you also learn from experience all the things that can go wrong, even in terms of governance of your own business. It's like, I don't want everybody to be able to see this. I don't want developers to see this. I don't want myself to see this on like my AWS console. So I don't want that to ever happen. If my phone gets stolen, or I don't want people to have access to my productions. A lot of stuff that seems basic, but I feel like I spend most of my time preemptively thinking about everything that could go wrong because I've seen it go wrong in the past.
It was funny. I was having a conversation with one of my peers the other day, and we were talking about senior IT people that come off as kind of bitter and jaded. And we came to the conclusion that a lot of times we think that that's because as you increase in seniority, your job becomes less about writing code and more about being a goalie.
Oh yeah.
and preventing everybody else from doing really bad stuff. And you just happen to be the goalie for so long just starts to kind of break your perspective.
You feel more responsible also for the thing that you're building, right? You don't want it to collapse because of a password that got stolen somewhere. Some data was printed out to a log that shouldn't have been there. And I think I like the way things, the whole cloud revolution, I think, has made things a lot easier for us. I'm not that old. It's not like I know the punch card, kind of era of software development. But I do remember many years ago how, when I started, how difficult it was to deploy things, how difficult even it was to run the same code in different environments. And now we have Docker. When you do cloud computing and you can deploy your software in different geographical locations, right? Like different availability zones on AWS, it's like you literally protect your software from a tornado destroying the building because there's a copy in another building.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're a junior, learn about all this as soon as you can. Do one of those courses on cloud computing, because you want to learn how to, I mentioned the business side of things, which is very important, but I think that the resilience side of things is very important too. How do you build software that will, be robust to all those edge cases? And I think that's so important. And it's so neglected now by people who say AI will do it. AI fails exactly at that, which is one of the most important things in business.
Yeah.
Clients can be very, very upset if the software doesn't run all the time, or if there are major catastrophes or data goes missing.
Well, and I've even found as an educator, because of the way technology has evolved, I'm spending a lot more time with beginners just explaining fundamentals. You would be shocked if you entered the classroom these days, just how many
Tell me more.
how many kids don't understand the file system. They don't understand directories. They don't understand files. They don't understand file extensions. They don't understand how their computer executes a program. And I'm spending a lot more time early on in my coding training just explaining the basics of how computers and file systems and networks and things work. Because, I mean, when I was young, you wanted to game with your friends. You picked up your PC, you went to their house, you set up a local LAN, you had to configure ports and IP addresses, and we were forced to learn this stuff. And nowadays you open up Steam and you just say, invite my friend, and it just works. And it's really destructive to somebody who wants to be a technology professional, because things are going to break and you have to be able to go one level deeper and understand why.
Yeah. And I feel that could be your edge also as a developer, because you need to be that person who will be able to, I feel a lot of the talent of a developer is seen when things go wrong, right?
Yes.
And that's what, if you have no idea how networking works. A few weeks ago, I was working with he's not technically a software engineer, but is a technical person. And we needed to send a request to a specific IP address of an external provider. And they had to whitelist us. And he thought, okay, we've been whitelisted because I sent a ping and I got a response. I mean, he didn't say that. He said, like, we've been whitelisted, all's good, And after a few days, I'm like, I don't think we've been whitelisted. This isn't working. And he's like, oh, no, I tested it. And how did you test? By sending a ping. The ping responds anyway. You can send it. I just sent it from my own computer. The ping is just telling me I'm alive here. It doesn't mean that they've whitelisted us on their API,
Right.
No, it's a different thing. He didn't know what a ping was for real.
And if you ask ChatGPT, if you say, hey, is the service up? It's going to say, hey, you should ping it.
Right. Probably. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Maybe
and that's one of those places where you're asking AI, but you don't have enough fundamental understanding to ask AI the right question.
Yeah. Look, when I went to uni, we actually had to build our own compiler. Mm-hmm. We called it C++, because it was a very basic language. But it was fully functional. We even had recursion and all that stuff. It was pretty interesting, and that's very painful. I don't know if all software developers need to go through that, but I feel like the deeper understanding of how things work, gave me. I think it helped me a lot. I know how a computer works, how a compiler works. I think that's helped a lot with many problems that I had to solve, and I don't regret it. I do think that educators, and I think sometimes they do train people, especially when you go to a very formal university, they teach you things in a way that is so disconnected from the rest that you'll learn the fundamentals, but they're useless, right? Mm-hmm. That was the case when I learned statistics at uni. Right. I didn't understand statistics. It was just, I just knew how to perform some calculations. Same thing with linear algebra. I didn't know what it meant to diagonalize a matrix I only learned how that could be useful much later at work, when I had to actually, transform maybe a 3D object or actually, this is what a matrix was for. I can rotate this, But and it's like, that's what we call them, rotations in linear algebra. But anyway, and I feel that's a pity that people learn this way, and I hold a grudge still. My teachers.
Yeah, no, I'm
terrible.
I'm with you. I've always told people, I've been in the education space for 10 years, and I always told people, if colleges did their jobs, I wouldn't have one.
Right.
Because anybody who wanted to learn anything would just go take a college course if they were that effective.
Yeah.
And they're not. And I work with a lot of colleges. I have my student-facing consumer stuff, but then I do a lot of training and build programs with colleges and enterprises and things like that. But it's always interesting, just the fundamental gap and how damaging it is to learning. I was working with a client, months ago, where they wanted to, onboard some new developers, and they wanted to start with Git. And I get into the room with these students, and we start exploring Git, and I discover that half the class doesn't know how the file system works. And I'm like, well, if you don't understand how your file system works, you're never going to understand how Git works.
What do you mean they didn't know how the file system worked?
Well, you start walking. I start walking them through. Okay, let's install Git. Okay, let's open your terminal. Let's open your command prompt. Right. And half the class doesn't even know what that is.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And they've never used it. And then I say, and then if you say something like, well, there's a hidden folder in your directory called .git, and they don't know how to navigate to a directory. They don't know how to view a hidden folder. Like if you're in Windows, like you have to turn that on. And there's just all these little fundamentals. And I'm like, you're never going to understand like what switching to a branch does on your local machine if you don't understand fundamentally how the file system works.
Yeah.
And then we have to hit pause and we have to do like this remedial course before I can teach them Git.
Right.
And, they're like, I don't know what a terminal is. And I don't know what the path is. Yeah. They skip they don't check the box to, if they don't check the box to add it to the path. And then they go in and type Git and they're like, I don't know why this doesn't work. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know why it doesn't work? It says the command's not found. Like you have to tell it where the command is.
Yeah.
And we
didn't learn when I was at uni. Well, we didn't learn. I call it uni because I live in the UK, right? I think we call it college. And I think there were a lot of basic stuff of real world programming that we didn't learn. Like we didn't learn Git, for example. And I think it was a lot because the teachers themselves, they're academics. They've actually never worked for a company ever. They don't know how things are done. And I feel like it was good to learn so much theoretical stuff. I think that kind of set me apart from other people because I went to a very, very kind of theoretical uni where it was more like a kind of computer science degree. But all the other part, we missed it. It was like, and it feels like the alternative at that university was a very short programming course where you didn't learn any of the fundamentals. It was more like either a boot camp sort of thing, or the hardcore, course where you learn how to build your compiler, but you never learn anything actually useful. So like two extremes, Yeah.
And it's still surprising to me because like I have my consumer courses and usually somewhere, depending on the time of year, usually somewhere between like a fifth and a third of my students are actively enrolled in a computer science program. And they're taking my coding courses because I teach full stack development and it's all together. Right. Whereas in their university, they might take a database class, they might take a programming class over here, but they never learn how to do this the way professionals do.
I never learned web development in my course.
Me either.
So we did learn how the internet worked. We learned networking. We learned all the protocols, like even to a very deep level. We had to study like the IP packets, So I did understand how things work, but all our programming was desktop software using C++, Java. We never
VB6.
learned all of the... What? No,
I use VB6. I use WinForms.
Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't because look, in my course, it was all console based. We never learned any UIs. So VB6 was like, it's all our the problems we solve are all mathematical. They're all theoretical. So it's just like a terminal, right? Yeah. And it was all, software design, very hardcore object oriented programming, how to design the software. And then, how do compilers work? How does assembler work? And I think we learned very good principles, but it was all completely detached from how software is actually done, how it's built. And it's funny because I feel like we learned, we did learn about what HTTP is, the protocol, but we did not learn how to send an API request. The first time I did that, it was at work, and I feel like it would be so easy to actually learn that, right? And it would kind of complete the circle of it, but we didn't. It was all things in isolation. And I think I've always been very curious, and I love to learn things a little too much sometimes. So that was good for me because I filled the blanks myself, and I sense that your students, they reach out to you because they want to fill the blanks. But I feel like a lot of my classmates, they didn't do that in their free time. It was enough that they were so stressed about the exams, and that makes it's such a shock when you join the real world. And I feel like another thing, look, as the person who's hired others, right? And hiring people in data science, for example, a lot. At one point, I helped the company hire data scientists, and I interviewed a lot of people. Like I think like 20 candidates in a few days. Like it was like I just didn't even remember the names because there was a lot of. I had to go to a lot of interviews, and I remember that one of the things that was the most important, I think, to everyone, to me, but also to the other people who were interviewing, was do these people know what data science means in the real world? Very basic questions, right? Because data is not perfect. We're not just trying to. So my questions were mostly, what I tried to know was, does this person really know the meaning of this, like in the real world? What does this mean? Like overfitting or stuff like that, and you need to validate that this works. How do you split the data? I'll show you one example of what I mean. We gave people an exercise before the interview, actually, and then we spoke about it during the interview. They had to predict something based on data. It was something about, let's say, whether a client will buy a product or not, whether they will click or not, based on data. And then for every client, you have features that represent the client, like the location, the age, the interest, stuff like that. And one of the columns was something totally random, like, I don't know, an internal ID of a client. You would normally exclude that from the prediction because it's like, this can't tell you anything about the client. Or let's say you have a phone number, but you have a linear algorithm, right? So it's kind of just the phone number, the absolute value of the phone number cannot represent the behavior of a person. If the phone number gets larger, it doesn't say anything about your purchasing pattern. Maybe you can extract, if you want, the area code or to know where the person's from, like potentially, and a lot of them, they just took all the data, they ran algorithms, but they never thought of excluding a column from the data that couldn't possibly predict anything, right? And one of my questions was like, why is this column here? Do you see any value in removing it? And a lot of them had never thought about that, And then, but the people who did, those the ones we hired were those people that are like, oh no, I excluded this because it doesn't make any sense. And they were very blunt about it. It's, oh no, this is, of course not. With programming, it's the same. Like, look, I hired a developer a while ago, and a person who does not come from a computer science school, a self-taught software developer, and I'm totally okay with that. And my questions were super easy. There was no like torture, complicated graph algorithms. It was like very simple. It was like, I don't know, show me how you can revert this list in Python. And the questions I asked were essentially, does he know what he's doing? Stuff like that. It was like, and that's what I cared about. Has this guy actually thought of the real world? What things are used for? What's the value of this, or what's the problem of this, of doing it this way? That was kind of my thing, because I feel like everybody, at the end of the day, everyone has studied computational complexity and stuff, and doesn't actually come up that often when you're actually working,
Yeah.
But what about all these other things?
One of the silver linings of AI, the AI explosion, is I think it's going to kill leak code, and I am so glad. I'm so glad.
Right.
Because I've never found leak code to be indicative of anything except memorizing a couple. Do you know what a depth first search is, and can you implement it in Python? Okay, you can do a third of the leak code questions now. It doesn't tell me that you know how to ship software. It doesn't tell you that you understand security or scalability or any of that stuff.
None of that.
And I've always been really offended.
Yeah, you need to learn how to solve leak code problems, right? You need to just practice all the graph algorithms. BFS, like you said.
But I have interviews. When I do interviews, I do them the way you do. I want to have a conversation about your decisions and why you made them. Do you understand why you made that decision? Do you understand the trade-offs of what you did here? I always ask a lot of questions. Like if somebody comes to me with a portfolio, I'm always like, well, why did you do your error handling on this layer? Just tell me. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong, but just tell me, walk me through your decision-making process. And if somebody can think and they understand things, then I'm really comfortable hiring them at that point. Yeah. And I think that's something that's increasingly getting lost. Yeah. The education system is really high stakes because you get a grade, and that grade kind of determines your future at the university. It determines your future with employers. And then, learning what we do is hard, and learning new things is cognitively stressful because your brain needs to change. And it's just like building muscles, right? Like I got no pain, no gain, right? And learning is an exercise, and you'll get frustrated, you'll get stuck. And I'm seeing more and more people coming out of college, because I interview them all the time, that have been using AI to avoid the pain.
Right.
But then you end up with somebody who wants $100,000 a year software developer job, who is basically just an interface between ChatGPT and your code.
Right.
And I keep trying to explain to people that I don't think that is a job. I don't think that's a job.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. And maybe there's also, educators fail at showing why the pain is worth it, or they subject students to pain that shouldn't be there. Like
Yes.
my work with linear algebra. Like I'm a bit of a nerd though, so I do like maths, but a lot of my classmates, they hated it. Like all the work we did with maths, and they never taught us how it could be valuable in any way. Right? And I think a lot of teachers, and I hate this because it's like a cop-out, is that, oh yes, maybe this isn't useful, but it trains your brain, it trains your discipline. It helps you become more used to maths. Or like, okay, can you teach me all of that and simultaneously do it by using something that's useful? Like, can I actually train my brain or learn how to think mathematically using problems that are actually useful in the real world? I think it's very lazy, to put it that way. So yeah, we're just teaching people. So for example, the way I was taught calculus was that we had to memorize the proofs of theorems in calculus. And when I say memorize them, we knew that the exam would be a question, prove this theorem. And it could be one out of a very long list of theorems, but you could literally memorize the whole thing. You could learn it by heart. And how is that learning calculus? It's like, what the hell? So you know what? When students use ChatGPT for stuff, for shortcuts, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but I wonder, are the teachers maybe to blame a little bit here?
Oh yeah.
The students actually wanting to do that in the first place.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right? Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, there's absolutely blame on both sides.
Definitely.
Yeah, some people will do anything to avoid discomfort, and those people are going to be ill-served by AI.
Yeah.
And then there's other people that genuinely, like you, they need to understand the relevance. And you need to build that into something that's applicable to the real world, something that's applicable to what they'll use someday, and why it's important. And I see a lot of content that as an educator is more of an information dump than it is a learning experience. And those are two very different things to me and my team. So but it's complicated.
Something I've been thinking about too, it's the role of education in general on degrees. And I think there's a book about this, which I haven't read, but the thesis of the book is that degrees are used for social signaling, or to signal to an employer that you are normal, essentially, right? And the fact that there's such an obsession because I think it's a bit of a trap, right? Because you see that people who have a degree, they're doing better in life. So it's like, oh, let's make everyone have a degree, right? So you got governments trying to increase the number of people getting a degree. And now everybody has, it could happen with high school degree, where people actually, you want to work for a supermarket, at the checkout, and they want, I don't know in the US, but in other places they do expect you to have a high school degree. And you do actually need that for that job, right? And probably not. But what is the employer trying to evaluate? At least where I grew up in South America, where for the basic stuff, they want a high school degree. They want to know that you grew up in a good environment where you could go to high school.
Yes.
That you didn't grow up in a place with filled with social problems that prevented you from going to high school, where maybe you had to work at an early age, or your parents couldn't send you to high school, right? So they actually want to validate that you're not going to be bringing any baggage. It sounds awful, but that's how it works there, right? That's why they want a high school. But now that everybody has the high school degree, now for basic stuff, even like, the university degree, right? And people get their undergrad in stuff that is completely useless, maybe, at least from a technical point of view. And then people are actually seeing value in hiring those who go through the pain, because it means they, potentially they are disciplined, or they come from a family that could afford that, and so it's basically a social signaling. And then, in some professions now, they want you to have a PhD. So it's like the bar is all the time going up and up, and I feel like policymakers think that it's actually the stuff that you'll learn in the degree that is helping you, and I don't think that's the case. I don't think learning trigonometry is useful for working at, I don't know, as a barista. No, it's not.
And even a PhD, is a PhD really necessary for all those, from, a lot, I think if you want to work as a quant or like in, as that kind of stuff, PhD is a must, but is it though? Or is it just even more signaling, about the discipline, more barriers, to entry? So
this person can show up for multiple years and do what they're told and fit into a system and follow the structure. That's more of the signal you're getting.
Yeah.
I realized really early on in my career when I started being a hiring manager that having a degree didn't mean anything about their skills at all.
Yeah, but it's a bit addictive, right? Because it's like, look,
And I think even Google did a study on that. It was years ago, but I think it was Laszlo Bach, or I forget his name. But I remember there was a big kerfuffle because Google did a study on their own internal workforce, and they said there is no statistical correlation that we can find between a person's degree and their ability to be a successful employee at Google. And I just, because I follow the education space because I work in it, and there was just this ripple that went out because these universities, if they can't express the value of a degree, and this is something that's happening with AI now because the assessment now needs to change. Because if you can get a degree without doing the work with AI, then what does a degree actually signal? Like what does its value in the marketplace actually have? And you're trying to sell these things in America, at least you're trying to sell these things for $50, $100, $150, $200,000.
Yeah.
And if that signal goes away, the universities are gonna get crushed eventually.
Yeah. If I were to propose a solution to that for the universities, I would definitely involve some sort of apprenticeship as part of the degree, or like emphasize that a lot. It's like do the legwork on the ground, just do in the field, go and get some real work done at a company, and as part of like they are doing that in some places. So maybe that would be a way out of that conundrum.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, in my classes I'm teaching now, I tell the students, I'm like, I don't care if you use AI to help you with some things, but I don't, like when I grade my students, they don't just submit their code and I run automated tests and just give them a grade. They come and they sit down with me for 15, 20 minutes. We review their code solution. I ask them questions. I challenge their design. I ask them questions about decisions they make. I ask them hypotheticals like, hey, if I wanted to add this feature, how would you go about it? Yeah. And the ones that are copying, even back in the day when they were copying from Stack Overflow, they can't answer those questions. Like,
right.
I don't think the assessment problem is as difficult as universities are fearing. You just have to have a conversation with people. Just have a conversation. And then they're like, oh, I have 100 students. I can't talk to all of them. And I'm like, okay, then it's like drug testing. Do a random sampling of your students. And if they know that the random sampling is coming, they're going to be less likely to cheat.
For it.
Yeah.
And some teachers are using AI to grade, papers or essays and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So they're actually taking shortcuts themselves, as far as I've heard. And
they are.
Yeah.
They are. So, and the interesting thing is it's making students furious.
Right.
Because they're paying a lot of money to get feedback from a professional.
Yeah.
And then they're getting feedback from a $20 AI tool.
Right.
But they're paying college tuition for that. So I am starting to see, at least in the education space, it's interesting because I'm seeing it among the students, the backlash against AI. Because they feel cheated. Like somebody who didn't put in the work and doesn't understand what they're doing is getting a better grade than me because of an AI tool. And my teachers aren't giving me value because they're using an AI tool that I could just use myself.
Right.
And I'm watching this with fascination because this is brewing right now.
But maybe AI is actually triggering a conversation that had to be had.
It is.
Right?
It is. I am both happy and terrified right now at what's happening.
Maybe it had to be exposed, Yeah. I've been writing books. There's another book in the works at the moment, and I launched a YouTube channel which I called Debunkonomics, but we'll see what happens with that channel because we'll see. I think I will definitely speak. So I'll tell you what my plan is. I want to speak a lot about value proposition, about moats, things that we spoke today, competitive advantage. Is a brand name a competitive advantage? So help people understand a bit more about the business side of things without the hype. Because even within that, you get a lot of hype, So understand the limits of AI. My first video was on why AI hallucinates. Why does it lie? Why does it make mistakes? Can that be solved? So I think there will be a lot of debunking, dehyping. That's what I want to do, and I feel that's what I can add the most value, because I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of experience on failed AI projects. I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of people lie. This is one of the things that I wish I hadn't had to learn. And when I was younger, I thought economies are efficient and everybody works, in the best interest of business, because that's how a business stays afloat. And then I started seeing people lie a lot, not necessarily with the intention of lying, but at one point it's like, oh my God, we got carried away. We launched this project. We hired 15 people for it. It was always a terrible idea because we didn't do all of that. We didn't analyze the value proposition, competitive advantage. And now I don't want to fire 15 people.
Right.
So I need to start, it needs to look to the rest of the company like we are adding value. And we're going to lie, but maybe not in an overt way. We're going to do experiments very loosely so that the results go our way. Right? Stuff like that, I've seen it a lot, and I think the world will become a better place when we all focus on adding real business value. We understand what that is. We focus on boring problems. I like to talk about that a lot. Boring problems that need to be solved they end up being a lot of fun, actually, when you get to solve a real problem and people use your product. So I'm going to be doing a lot of that, a lot of the debunking. My next book will be on economics. I've been working on it a lot. I just launched a book on AI for software developers, so it needs to be, I think your audience may be interested. I actually have it here because I just got it. It's
the pocket guide. Yes.
The pocket book, yeah. It's actually a pocket book. It's small because I wasn't sure they were going to make it look small. The publisher was like, because they don't usually do it. Like, let's not call it a pocket book and make it big, but they did, and it's a good job. So I launched the book, and I'm working on the next one, which is on economics. I will be, again, debunking, if you want, an economic theory that has become very popular, which is MMT, modern monetary theory. It's become very, very popular. And it's kind of this I like to debunk stuff, and I've learned a lot about this theory. And I think even if you're a software developer, I think you can learn about this because you can see about how people reason in bad ways. And one of the things that's very fun about MMT or even economics in general is that people they have good intentions, right? And they start in a good way. And then at some point, something goes wrong. Like it could happen in a company, like I was saying earlier. You build your whole AI team, and then you realize, actually, my product, nobody wants this. It's like, what do we do now? Or the product hallucinates, and it's dead now. And then with economics, it happens. People, they formulate a theory, it all looks good, and they kind of make a mistake. Sometimes it's a severe mistake, But then they have political reasons maybe to continue pushing this because they think the intentions are good behind the theory. It's like, let's look away. Let's not consider the mistakes. And then one of the things that's funny about MMT is that the prescription of this theory is like, let's just let the government print money. Because we can actually achieve a lot of stuff. They call it policy space. There's space to do more things that we're not doing because we're not letting the government print money. And the fear is that it's going to cause inflation. But it won't because of a number of reasons. And they've developed a whole theory around that. And I grew up in Argentina, so I have a bit of experience with inflation. So it kind of I think this may have pushed me, toward I need to write this book as a cautionary tale. Is it like, I've heard this story before, and it hasn't gone very well. And I left the country a long time ago before the worst thing happened with inflation. But I feel like I like to debunk stuff because I feel like it's very easy, especially if you don't have the time to properly learn those things, right? Mm-hmm.
to an outsider, they can't know if AI hallucinations will get solved or not, because what are they going to do? They're going to study machine learning.
Yeah.
They don't work on this. Like, let's say a person, a business person trying to launch a startup, are they going to learn about hallucinations? Probably not, either because they don't have the time or they don't have the knowledge, to do that. And I like to do that, to study things and then go and debunk them inside out, and also acknowledge the good side, of things, or the good side of AI, right? And I think in acknowledging the limitations, we can actually build good AI-based products. Those are the ones that will succeed, the ones where you knew the limitations, right? And that's how you start, and then you build a good product. So I think that's me in the future. Speak about all this stuff more through my channel, launching this book. I think I already know what the following book will be about. So I'll keep writing books. Yeah, I do enjoy doing that. It's very difficult. AI can't help me.
Yeah, no. As an educator, that's something else. Like people, I'm watching these people say, "Oh, well, AI is just going to write all the educational content," and I'm like, believe me, I'm in the space. I tried to get it to help me with some things, but it is so bad. It is so bad. It leaves gaps and
because the value of your work is in choosing what to say, how to say it, choose the examples, right? That's what makes you a good educator, not the grammar.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of people, they are seduced by the outputs of AI. It looks like it's good, but it's not. It's very superficial, right?
It is.
But it's very hard to argue against that. I spoke with a venture capitalist who told me, I just analyze companies by sending the pitch to AI, and look, the analysis looks so good, like the market opportunity. I'm like, is that how you're investing? Is that how you're...
Yeah.
Is that what you think? Like, is this so superficial? It can sound like a great analysis, but I'm hoping that, you're actually bringing something else to the table than, maybe this guy is not.
Yeah.
Maybe, but, and it's the same with writing. And I always tell the story of Homeland, the TV show, the spy show with Claire Danes, and how every year the writers and the cast, actually even the actors of the show, met with people who had worked in the space, like ex-CIA. They met Edward Snowden once, right, to brainstorm what the next season should be about, so that it could kind of mirror what was going on in the world. And that's how they kept the show so relevant. It's like almost like, whenever the show aired, it spoke about things that were happening, even though it was shot a year before. All of that work, AI can't do that for you. But writing a good show is about that, or shooting a show in front of a live audience or a test audience to see their reactions, and then rewriting the lines when people didn't laugh. All of that work, it's like AI can't do any of that. But then people say AI will do screenwriting. Well, probably not, because it can't really do any of that, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we're in agreement on that.